Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest video in our series focused on IR careers. We are joined once again by Smooch Repovich Reynolds, founder and CEO of Smooch Unplugged. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, Tim. Thanks for including me. It's always a pleasure to speak with you and talk about these critical subjects for IR professionals.
No, great to see you, Smooch. And in this video, we're going to discuss, what tomorrow's IR professional will look like. And Smooch, we've spoken a little bit about this before, and I think you've got some really interesting thoughts on this area and where the profession is going. So really looking forward to getting into it.
This is one of the most exciting aspects of what I do for a career, Tim, is the evolution of this profession. So I'm glad that we're talking about it.
Me too. And so to begin the discussion, let's talk a little bit about where the profession, how the profession has gone up until now. IR professionals currently come from a variety of different backgrounds, accounting, investment banking, previously communications, although not so much today. So Smooch, I wanted to start off by asking you, as the IR industry has grown and developed, what changes have you seen in terms of where IR professionals are coming from into the profession?
Well, there's a lot of places that IR professionals are coming from today versus even 10 years ago, Tim. And that's, I think, one of the most vibrant, exciting aspects of this career journey is the possibilities. And I've always viewed this role as an intersection of everything inside of a company. And I think from a profession standpoint in the lanes that people come into this from, it is the same thing. There's a wide variety. So today, part of what's happened pre-pandemic, but certainly during the pandemic, and I think this will continue, a lot of IR professionals, because of their roots in finance, whether it's Wall Street or it's corporate finance, they are advancing rapidly into one of two lanes. The IR plus role, so it could be IR plus FP&A plus strategy, corporate development, or they're moving on to CFO roles. And not just CFO roles in operating groups of big companies, but the corporate level public-facing CFO role. And I think that's exciting. That's been a long time coming. We've been kind of working on it for a decade with talent, and now they're finally making those moves, which I'm excited about. And there's two new kind of profiles that are dabbling their big toes into the IR profession. One is professionals who come out of global consulting organizations. And I think that's interesting because these consulting organizations really cultivate a very different way of strategic thinking and that process with their talent than a lot of other companies do. And I think that is a huge competitive advantage for an IR professional. And I think the other area that we're seeing more people come from, which I talked about 10, 15 years ago, is being a global economist. And, it seems a little kind of obtuse, a little out there, but I have to tell you, I was having an interesting discussion with a global CFO the other day. And I was talking to him about both of these kind of areas of experience. And he said, talk to me about the global economy piece. And the obvious answer is the world, here in the US, we don't work just on the US economy. The world is interlocked, right? All of these countries, the geopolitical climate, their economies, we're all holding hands together one way or another. So having someone who's had that economist background come into IR gives a wholly different and specific perspective to a management team and a board than someone who doesn't come with it.
No, but that's very interesting, Smooch. Thank you so much. And yeah, just a follow-up question on that. These new roles you're talking about, the consulting role, the global economy, people coming from those backgrounds. To what extent is that something we're seeing now, or is it more of something you're expecting to happen? You said companies were dabbling in it, so I just wondered to what extent it's something that you're working on at the moment versus something you expect to how the industry you expect to see it change over the future.
Well, I'm out there as the biggest cheerleader of having these people who have different career experiences get into IR, especially when you talk about the global economy and you talk about the consultative approach that someone coming out of one of these big consulting firms brings. So we're seeing a small percentage of people with that experience in their backgrounds getting into IR. My prediction for the future is in the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot more of that. So, for example, when you have experience in a global consulting firm, and you're dealing with clients and immersing themselves in their business, you think about the competitive intelligence and analysis differently than you do more often than not as an IR professional. Not that IR professionals don't have a respectable viewpoint, but it's different when you grow up and you spend 10, 12 years in consulting. Your ability to, with a fine tooth comb, analyze a business, analyze competitors, and understand the nuances is huge. And I think that, again, is another way that an IRO can help management to fine tune how they think about developing their narrative with the street. Which I'll tell you, the number two items that my clients look for today in an IR practitioner is how do you frame the narrative and what are the nuances? And how do you find what's the journey of the hunt to figure out those nuances and writing skills? I have to tell you, I don't, it's just amazing to me that people don't know how to write. And companies are getting more and more particular and have higher expectations on that front.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, we had a couple of years ago, we had an article which was simply advice on how to sort of, do investor relations writing, how to, write things like press releases, for example. One of our most popular articles on the website. So it shows there's a lot of demand for that information. And I think very interesting how you're saying that these new sources for, investor relations professionals, that speaks to how the role is evolving and what companies are looking for in terms of their sort of IR lead. But just in terms of those roles, things like consulting, global economy, and so on, how much of an interest or demand is there for people in those roles at the moment to come into IR? I mean, is that something they're actively looking at? Is that something that's on their radar increasingly, a move into IR?
The IR profession isn't on anybody's radar, Tim. I mean, it's not like you go to business school and professors are talking about the IR profession as a bona fide career. So I think it is, I mean, IR Magazine plays a very influential role in communicating with talent in a lot of different areas. I think that people like me who are out there speaking to a wide variety of executives about careers, populating, if you will, my conversations with CFOs about what do you need to be thinking about? What are the right considerations about different headsets and pieces of experience? And that's how you pull different professional backgrounds into a profession like this. It's not like a CFO or a general counsel. A general counsel is like a straight line shot to the top chair. Pretty easy, the gates you have to go through. It's very different with IR, but I also think that's the exciting part about what an IRO brings. And every company has different needs when it comes to dealing with the investment community around the world. So the more diverse that the profession is and the diversity of thinking, the better off the profession is longer term. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great answer, Smooch. And as you know, we like to finish these videos with sort of one takeaway or piece of advice that people can use. So yeah, what would be one thing you say to our audience, today that they could go away and think about to help them prepare for, some of the changes that are coming to the IR profession?
Well, I'll give you two answers about that, Tim. One, from the hiring executive standpoint, be open-minded. Understand and broaden your own view about what the breadth of career experience can bring to the IRO leader that you're going to think about hiring. For candidates navigating their careers, if you're 15, 20 years into your career, you can't go back and get a degree as an economist, right? You can't go spend 10 years in a consulting firm getting that experience. But what you can do, you could take a course, a graduate level course about the global economy, gather the knowledge. You're never going to learn it like someone who's been an economist, but you will know the right data points and the right pieces of that content bucket to be able to dive deep into and ask questions of with your colleagues. I would also say that if you have a global economist at your company and more hiring them, go spend time talking to that person, work on a project, be on a team with them, learn through observation. If you have colleagues who've worked in consulting firms, learn through observation about how they think about business because it's very different. And I've always felt that learning through observation is one of the most powerful ways to kind of beef up your arsenal of thinking, of experience, and all of that. And I think that going into this continued evolution of the IR profession would be additive to people.
Thank you very much, Smooch. No, that's great advice. And as you say, you know, people can't go away and sort of change their background or study something new from scratch, but there's lots of different ways that you can, you know, bring these skills and experience and learn more about them and sort of beef up your professional profile that way. Smooch, it's been fantastic talking to you about this topic. Thank you so much for joining us again today.
You're very welcome, Tim. And I just want to add one more point that to kind of dovetail what you just said in your closing remarks. The notion of having a continuous learning headset is huge. And again, it's one of the top criteria that companies, whether they're pre-IPO all the way to the mega caps, they're looking for in talent. And I think that those who invest in their careers, whether it's taking a course, talking to others, I mean, sometimes just talking to your peers around the world, is you learn something. If you're on that continuous learning journey, you're always going to be ahead of a peer in the profession. So I encourage people to do that as well.
No, that's great advice. And yeah, there's many ever more ways to do that, I think, in the current environment that we're in to keep that professional learning and experience going. But as always, to our audience out there, if you have any ideas for discussion topics for this video series, please get in touch at editorial@irmagazine.com. But from us, thank you so much again for joining us and see you again soon.